This is my audience. For my persuasive speech, I'm going to discuss why I believe childhood vaccines should be mandated by the government. There is a myth that since major illnesses have largely disappeared, we really don't need vaccines anymore. Measles used to sound like such an old-fashioned disease, but the Disneyland measles outbreak last spring put it back in the news with over 140 cases reported. Parents who have chosen not to vaccinate their children are commonly referred to as anti-vaxxers. Public health leaders and medical experts have clearly stated the message, vaccinate your children, and try their best to sway the anti-vaxxers to become pro-vaccine. The history of vaccines date back to when the Chinese used inoculation techniques against smallpox in as early as 1000 AD. The first instance of vaccine promotion in the United States was in 1721, when Cotton Mather, a Puritan minister, encouraged smallpox vaccination in response to an outbreak. Vaccination, as practiced today, came into being when Edward Jenner, an English physician and scientist, created the first smallpox vaccine using cowpox and vaccinating an 8-year-old boy in 1796. In 1809, the town of Milton, Massachusetts, became the first U.S. town to offer free smallpox vaccinations, which was followed by a state law the same year requiring the smallpox vaccine. In 1855, Massachusetts passed the first U.S. state law mandating vaccinations for school children. By 1963, 20 states would require immunization to attend public schools, and 29 states by 1970. From the beginning of vaccinations, there have been people opposed to them. The Anti-Vaccination Society of America was founded in 1879, the same year the first laboratory-created vaccine was developed. In 1951, Dr. Jonas Salk and his team developed a method to cultivate the polio virus in monkey kidney tissue in order to be able to produce large amounts of the vaccine. On April 12, 1955, the results of the Salk vaccine trials showed the vaccine was 80 to 90% effective, and the U.S. government licensed the IPV polio vaccine the same day. The use of the Salk vaccine reduced the number of paralytic polio cases from 28,985 in 1955 to 72 in 1965. In my opinion, most people today have never had to live through an epidemic of the diseases vaccines help prevent today. Parents worry about the side effects that vaccines could potentially cause. However, the side effects are not nearly as damaging as having the disease. My grandmother was a polio survivor who for the most of her adult life dealt with the after effects of having polio, which is now called post-polio syndrome. My grandmother was 27 years old with 3 young children when she was stricken with polio. She was paralyzed and had to lie flat on her back in a hospital for 9 months. She was treated at a Kenny hospital with a treatment method Sister Elizabeth Kenny had developed. It was a very painful form of physical therapy that instead of immobilizing afflicted limbs, aimed to relieve pain and spasms in polio patients through the use of hot, moist packs to relieve muscle spasms, and early activity and exercise to maximize the strength of unaffected muscle fibers, and promote the neuroplastic recruitment of remaining nerve cells that had not been killed by the virus. My grandmother lived with physical disabilities for 62 years until her death in 2013. The simplest everyday task was difficult for her because of severe muscle atrophy. I do not think there is any side effects of vaccinations that would have me not vaccinate my child after seeing what my grandmother endured. The diseases are much worse than any potential side effect from the vaccines. Vaccines prevent babies against 14 serious childhood diseases, such as pertussis, chickenpox, influenza, and measles. Vaccines contain antigens, which are weakened versions of disease-causing germs. This will tell a baby's immune system to make antibodies. Antibodies fight off bacteria and viruses. These antibodies will attack germs before it causes the disease. This means that viruses help a baby develop immunity without having suffering through an illness. If a baby is not vaccinated, there is a greater chance of him or her catching a germ, which is extremely dangerous since infants can be more susceptible than older children and adults to complications from diseases. For example, pneumonia and meningitis could lead to brain damage and death in children under 1 year old. All 50 states and the District of Columbia have state laws that require children entering childcare or public schools to have certain vaccinations. There is no federal law that requires this. Many people who are against these state laws fear what ingredients are in the vaccines their child will be receiving. Other reasons could be they are against them for religious purposes. They believe they have the right to choose since this is a free country, or they feel since there are no known long-term side effects of vaccines, they do not trust the injections. I believe childhood vaccines should be mandated by the government because, in my opinion, parents want to do everything possible to make sure their children are healthy and protected from preventable diseases, and vaccinations are the best way to do that. And that's my reasoning behind why I believe childhood vaccines should be mandated by the government. And this is my audience.